Who are the best pickups on the Week 15 waiver wire for fantasy football? And where can you find the best help for your fantasy football teams, short and long term, as we go into the fantasy football playoffs? It's time to break it down right here, right now, as we begin another edition of Pickup Tuesday, only on Locked On Fantasy Football.
Are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Vinnie Iyer, and I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL and fantasy football for SportingNews.com. Week 14 in the books, the Cardinals-Patriots game. What a mess that was. Unless you had James Conner, you were happy about that game, but Kyler Murray, unfortunately, goes down with a knee injury early in the game. Looks like a season ender, a little bit of doubt for availability early next season as well. So real bummer there if you're looking for Kyler Murray to finish your season strong. You could have had a big game. The Patriots struggle against running quarterbacks. Well, we never saw that. We saw Colt McCoy struggle, get sacked a lot. The Patriots had a defensive touchdown there, scoop and score from DeAndre Hopkins. It was pretty brutal out there. Then the Patriots side of things, they lose Devontae Parker in a good matchup. They already didn't have Jacoby Myers there with a concussion, and it was pretty ugly. They had a big play from Hunter Henry, didn't score. He had 70 yards receiving to lead the team. But then you had Ramondre Stevenson get hurt, came back in, then came back out. They already didn't have Damian Harris, so they relied a lot on Kevin Harris and another young player, Pierre Strong Jr., to carry the load. It was a mess there for fantasy. If you're looking for key points from anyone other than the Patriots defense or James Conner, it was definitely a really disappointing end to Week 14, and hopefully some of you survived that to play in the fantasy football playoffs. And you do need to look at the waiver wire still if you're there in the playoffs. Congratulations here. A lot of the leagues going there. If you're in a smaller league, you probably are playing one more week before you have a 2-week playoff there. So still a lot to be determined here. Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. We are free and available to you on all platforms. Today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is sponsored by SimpliSafe Home Security with fast protective technology exclusively from SimpliSafe. 24/7 monitoring agents capture evidence to accurately verify a threat for faster police response. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. Visit simplisafe.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more. All right, we'll get into the waiver wire. I'll break it down this week as we'll look at wide receivers. A lot of talk about wide receivers. Then we'll get into our quarterbacks and tight ends, including the pickup that's the most exciting there was Chig Okonkwo, the Titans tight end, a very exciting player, and came through big time last week for fantasy. We liked him, so he's on the radar, but a lot of wide receiver help out there, and a lot of wide receiver things we're navigating through with DJ Moore out potentially. You have the two Bengals guys, T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd, dealing with injury, and then Deebo Samuel, high ankle sprain. So a lot of replacements may be needed here for the fantasy football playoff time. So we'll get into those players that can maybe give you some help as a boosted wide receiver 3 or flex spot here. And otherwise, we'll look at the running backs that you need to kind of stack there that might have some value because of injuries, or just getting ahead of injuries and handcuffing so you don't get stuck in a bad situation with your running backs in critical times. And we saw that last year, the Boston Scott situation, right? It developed. People had Boston Scott. He was big down the stretch to win games in the fantasy football playoffs. So get to that. Let's dive right into the wide receivers. Yeah, a lot to cover here for sure. DJ Chark, I did like him last week. I was a little bit worried about Jameson Williams, and you still have to be. I mean, he did have one catch, his first catch as an NFL player, the dynamic rookie from Alabama. He stretched the field and scored a touchdown, but Chark was definitely involved here. Really, this Lions passing game is on fire now. The pass protection is really good for Jared Goff. You have Josh Reynolds back as well. Amon-Ra St. Brown drawing a lot of attention in the slot, but love this Lions passing game right now. It is clicking here, and it's also not tight end dependent anymore, right? Without TJ Hawkinson, they're not necessarily throwing to these other guys out there, including James Mitchell, the rookie. So it's about the wide receivers. Jared Goff likes going there. Remember back in the Rams day, he was good at spreading the ball around the three receivers outside, inside. So Evan Ross and Brown is kind of like the Cooper Cup, but DJ Chark has kind of become like the Robert Woods in this situation. So that's good for Chark, and it's a tough matchup this week against the Jets. We'll see where Sauce Gardner lines up. He could go inside. Maybe. I doubt they'll do that. So Chark may be running into that spot, or they might contain Jameson Williams. We're not quite sure, but Chark getting enough volume and has been productive the last 2 weeks. It was not a fluke revenge game against the Jaguars there in week 13. He's involved. He's a key part of what they want to do. That's why they signed him to a flyer. The whole thing was, can he stay healthy? Remember, he was a very good fantasy receiver for a time with the Jaguars and Gardner Minshew, and then injuries and things, they kind of fell out of favor there. So that injury last year against the Bengals was scary, and we thought he had a big year. So he has fantasy football relevance, and the talent is there to be productive. So I do like DJ Chark. And tough matchup this week, but you can still probably plug him in if you're needing him as a wide receiver 3. How about Chris Moore? Again, it was a little bit late developing with Brandon Cooks and Nico Collins missing time. We weren't sure how it was going to play out with the Texans wide receivers. Chris Moore was a decent pickup last week as a speculative ad. I mean, there was also Philip Dorsett that could have come through there, but Chris Moore was the guy that got the targets. And they also had a weird quarterback situation between Davis Mills and one Jeff Driscoll there. So Moore really coming through, catching 10 balls for 124 yards, so targeted all over the field against the Cowboys. He was motivated, playing hard here, and that's the whole thing. What Texans are going to play hard? Now, Dameon Pierce has a high ankle sprain here, so we're looking at the potential missing time here. So they're going to throw the ball a little bit more. The game scripts are negative. The Cowboys secondary is soft, and they took advantage of that, and they do have some weaker defenses here down the stretch. So I look at Chris Moore still having pretty good volume here, especially if both those receivers continue to miss time. I think Brandon Cooks is checked out. I mean, Nico Collins is a young player, probably wants to get on the field there a little bit more than Brandon Cooks, but I think Cooks is pretty much done. He's kind of James or Allen Robinsoning this rest of the season. The way he played with the Bears down the stretch was really embarrassing. Well, I think Brandon Cooks is trying to get on another new team here in 2023 and get to the right situation. Maybe he'll find out where Tom Brady's going, maybe, and that's where Brandon Cooks will maybe want to go for reuniting there. But for this purpose, Chris Moore looks like the best Texans receiver down the stretch. Don't forget about Alec Pierce. He had a nice game against the Cowboys. Speaking of the Cowboys, so maybe they wake up some receivers that are number 2. They've had a lot of problems with those type of receivers on the alignment here because their number 2 corner is pretty weak without just Anthony Brown in the lineup. So they've got Kelvin Joseph covering, and we know Trayvon Diggs can give up big plays. So looking at Alec Pierce, that warmed him up a little bit. Great matchup this week against the Vikings. DJ Chark just took advantage of that. So really liking Pierce this week, maybe reheating that. They didn't use him enough here when they made that weird transition to Sam Ehlinger, and then had the firing of Frank Reich and Jeff Saturday. He's kind of forgotten man, but he got going again before the bye. I think they'll get the rookie more involved. And a great matchup on the outside against the Vikings here in week 15 to play him and keep playing him here after his much needed rebound, bounce back game or breakout, whatever you want to call it, against the Cowboys in week 13. Elijah Moore, we'll see. Corey Davis got hurt again, a little bit of a head injury. So Corey Davis simply can't stay on the field. Elijah Moore did look pretty good with his target share. They're playing off Garrett Wilson, and you get the Lions this week. So it's a pretty good matchup. The Lions struggle with slot. Elijah Moore plays there quite a bit here. We saw a big game from Christian Kirk just a couple weeks ago. This week, Adam Thielen did some damage. So that's really good for Elijah Moore. If you're looking for a streaming wide receiver, it's a really good guy to pick up and plug and play this week, especially if Corey Davis seems to be ruled out in that one. So, again, Lions Jets could be a sneaky shootout here. The Jets can struggle at times away from Gardner, and they play that zone defense that's going to help the underneath throws quite a bit here for Goff. But again, the Jets are in a really good spot, especially if Mike White can play. A scary moment with that ribs injury where he'll be hospitalized after the game. But I think he'll be out there. I don't feel great about Davis, so that's going to help more as well playing off Wilson. Trenton Irwin may be flying under the radar. I'm not saying go chase that flea flicker 45-yard touchdown he caught from Joe Burrow against the Browns. But look at this situation. Trent Irwin is their replacement slot. He can't play the outside a little bit. Tyler Boyd with that finger injury, as we mentioned, going to miss at least one game, probably this Tampa game this week, maybe 2 games. And then T. Higgins, who knows with that hamstring? He's had 2 situations where the aggravation, he looked okay, but then he couldn't play during the game. So Trent Irwin looks healthy. There's definitely a chemistry factor there with Joe Burrow playing off Jamar Chase. So again, Trent Irwin, again, should not be slept on. I mean, we were all looking earlier, remember Mike Thomas, when Higgins was going to miss time or Chase was going to miss time. But no, Mike Thomas is not really on the radar here. You have Trent Irwin, you have a little bit of Trent Taylor, but he's more return man and a little bit smaller. Irwin gives them a little bit of size there. So I feel like Trent Irwin, again, is a little bit of sleeper here against the Buccaneers this week and just flying under the radar. Not on a lot of real pickups here, but injuries create opportunities. We saw that with Chris Moore, and I think Trent Irwin could be the Chris Moore going forward here, playing off game. And we're not going to totally ignore Paris Campbell for the Colts. I get it. He was involved quite a bit before Pierce kind of got going, but I think they'll really make it a point to get Pittman and Pierce there. But again, this team between the third receiver and the tight end is a little bit fickle, so I'm not going to necessarily go there too much with the Colts. I don't want to invest in them, but it is a good matchup this week for the Vikings. Jameson Williams, not a bad stash, but again, he's still behind a few guys there, the 3 veterans in Detroit, and needs to get a little bit more volume there. Kadarius Toney, we'll see if he can return. Juju Smith-Schuster did have a surprisingly good game against the Broncos in that tough secondary last week, but Toney is a big playmaker there. And the Bills just re-signed Cole Beasley, so I don't know what to think there. Like, he's there. And speaking of former Cowboys receivers, you had T.Y. Hilton, another Colts guy, go to the Cowboys. So it was a little bit weird. These teams are looking for wide receiver help, and that's not good here for the usage of other players. But Isaiah McKenzie, they might need to get a little bit more run if they're disappointed in Gabe Davis, get him the ball a little bit. Cole Beasley's just a guy at this point, so don't be worried about that too much. But McKenzie, I think, will have a little bit more value down the stretch than Hilton getting that crowded mix here with the Cowboys, Michael Gallup, James Washington, and Noah Brown behind CeeDee Lamb. Van Jefferson or Tutu Atwell, I think if you're looking for a floor, you look for Jefferson. If you're looking for some upside, big playability, I think you look at Atwell. These are the 2 best receivers. I wouldn't go for Ben Skowronek all that much. He's just not reliable from week to week. But I think Jefferson and Atwell just have more upside. I prefer to go for the upside here when we're looking at receivers down the stretch. Robert Woods, not a lot of upside, but he's the best receiver should Traylon Burks miss more time. If not, I think you can be comfortable leaving Woods and Nick Westbrook-Ikine on the shelf. Nelson Aguilar did get 10 targets on Monday night when Devontae Parker was ruled out. He didn't have Jacoby Myers, so we'll watch what happened with Parker and his concussion and Myers. Can he come back? But it's the Raiders this week. Revenge game for Nelson Aguilar, so that's something to watch out as well. So there's no doubt that Bill Belichick will have that in mind a little bit because Aguilar is a former Raider, and he might be the best wide receiver that the Patriots have healthy for this game. So something to look at there if you're desperate. But monitor these injuries. There's some opportunity created just by volume and matchups alone there at wide receiver that you must take advantage of. All right, there's a look at the wide receivers. We'll look at quarterbacks and tight ends in our next segment and close the show looking at running backs and streaming defenses you can target on the waiver wire for some help, whether you're looking for some bench insurance or looking for someone who can plug and play at some weak spots. We've got you covered here on today's show, Pickup Tuesday. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is also brought to you by BetOnline. Now, it's an exciting time of year with the NFL, final 4 weeks of the regular season, so we only have a few more weeks to get in on the full slate of games here. We will have exciting playoff action after that. We've got NBA and NHL looking good here as we head toward the All-Star break soon for both sports here. We've got the World Cup, of course, big semifinals, and then the final coming up there on Sunday. So check it out with definitely Argentina and Morocco and getting the excitement there on the other side, France and Croatia. A lot of good stuff there that you look at from those 4 teams still alive. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis for all those sports. Get the latest trends and odds for every professional amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season to basketball and the World Cup. They've got it all at BetOnline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can even find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today or use a mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right. Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first today as we give you Pickup Tuesday waiver wire advice. For a second listen today, check out Locked On Sports Day. From the games that matter the most to the big stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard, behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Day available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, let's look at the waiver wire quarterback and tight end, Mike White. Let's hope he's okay because the matchups are fantastic here the next couple of weeks here. For him, he's at home. He gets the Detroit Lions and their secondary. We saw Kirk Cousins just go nuts, throw for more than 400 yards. He's got the weapons with Wilson and Moore and other guys out there if Corey Davis doesn't play. So Mike White at home, really good spot. They also play the Jaguars next week. So Mike White could be very valuable as a streamer in the fantasy football playoffs. Yeah, I don't love the player Mike White in general, but the opportunity is there. He's going to distribute the ball to the playmakers, and sometimes that's all you need from the quarterback. Is he going to be comfortable enough, be aggressive enough to put the ball up? Is he going to be involved, again, against two quarterbacks that are going to put up some numbers, possibly with Jared Goff and Trevor Lawrence, even against that tough Jets defense? Brock Purdy managed 3 touchdowns, 1 on the ground, two through the air, didn't get 200 yards passing against the Buccaneers, but the game script was pretty negative. Here this week, the 49ers get the Seahawks. You can run all over the Seahawks. That's my one concern. The other concern is Purdy is playing through an oblique injury. So I don't know if I would like him this week, but at least as a backup, the way you treated Jimmy Garoppolo, I think you can treat Brock Purdy, potential streamer in the right matchups, and someone that has the keys to some weapons, although he's down Deebo Samuel. So has Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, Jawan Jennings, Ray McLeod, all these other guys that can make plays for Purdy. So something to watch there, but I don't know if I would play him this week. I think the negative game script won't happen enough. And you also have the running game should go off against the Seahawks this week. But still, I like Purdy. I like him having the keys to that 49ers offense. Mac Jones, good spot. Maybe a revenge game against Josh McDaniels. Probably mad that he left him with Pat Patricia. But definitely there's some potential there with Mac Jones if they open up the offense, especially with the running back questions there with the injuries. Desmond Ridder, he's starting for the Falcons. I'm excited to see this kid play. I loved him in Cincinnati, 4-year starter. They got to the college football playoff with him. He's an aggressive downfield thrower, so he's not going to be like Marcus Mariota and be contained there. And he's also a much better runner. He's very similar to Mariota, except he's not conservative. He's going to move around, make some plays. He's going to make some mistakes, but I think he's going to wake up some of these offensive playmakers a little bit more. And again, cheat code with the running ability. Ridder, the Saints are not going to know what they see in him yet. So I like Ridder as a pickup, sure, as a stash in a lot of leagues. Definitely in Superflex. If you had Mariota, you got to get Ridder. Matt Ryan, we've been down on him. It is the Vikings this week. We do like the matchups here for Michael Pittman Jr., Alec Pierce, and Paris Campbell. So maybe some garbage points there against Kirk Cousins, the Vikings putting up points. Ryan Tannehill looked good last week, had a couple touchdowns, one to Chig Okonkwo, one to Westbrook Ikine. They're throwing a little bit more, playing off Derrick Henry. They do get the Chargers this week. That sets up things in the passing game, playing off the run here. Ryan Tannehill still has some decent value, the right matchups. Taylor Heineke, not as exciting, doesn't put up the big numbers, but the Giants' defense is really struggling this week. And we like his weapons overall. Jahan Dotson in the mix again with Terry McLaurin and Curtis Samuel. So Heineke has some weapons. It's more about the volume. They have to throw quite a bit here, or it's going to be disappointing. So he's on the lower end. Pick up Sam Darnold. Also, they don't throw a lot anymore. They're all about run heavy. He only had 120 yards passing last week, but Steelers maybe an opportunity. They're pretty weak in pass defense, but could be a little bit trickier than we think at home. There are some good matchups as well with Detroit coming around the corner for Darnold, where definitely he'll have to throw the ball a little bit more opposite Goff. All right, tight end Chig Okonkwo, Chigozine Okonkwo from Maryland. He is an exciting rookie for sure. Making a lot of plays here. He can stretch the field. We've seen that. And now they're using him in the red zone as well. So he's going to be a key target. Treylon Burks has to miss more time. Regardless, with Woods and Westbrook Ikine being limited wide receiver options here, they need to involve the tight end a little bit more. Keep in mind, that used to be a staple of their offense with Delaney Walker, and he was a big fantasy star. And then they found some limited success with other guys. But Okonkwo is the guy you look at. Austin Hooper also getting involved. So a little bit maybe some 12 personnel there to make up for some wide receiver deficiencies and depth issues there in Tennessee. But I do like Okonkwo, the upside way over Austin Hooper at this point. Taysom Hill, if he's still eligible tight end in your league, you still have some buzz here. You can play with Andy Dalton. They're playing the Falcons this week. It's a very good matchup on the ground. They use him a little bit more after this bye week to help Alvin Kamara slumping, especially with Mark Ingram on the shelf here with a knee injury. Tyler Conklin, again, he could be the beneficiary of no Corey Davis here, playing off Elijah Moore and Garrett Wilson, I should say. Tyler Conklin has a little bit of run. It is a good matchup against the Lions. And Daniel Bellinger came out of that Eagles game late with the ribs injury, but he was getting involved quite a bit at tight end. The matchup is decent this week. The Commanders are okay against the tight end, but definitely they want to use him as a target, as not much is there beyond Richie James here at this point for the Giants passing game and Daniel Jones. All right, there you have it. There's a look at the quarterbacks and tight ends. Not a lot there, not nearly as much as we had at wide receiver. We have quite a bit running back we'll get into in our final segment, looking at the immediate maybe replacements as well as long-term for the 4 weeks and trying to find the handcuffs here that you need on Locked On Fantasy Football. Our daily fantasy football partner here at Locked On Fantasy Football is PrizePicks, and we're excited to be partnered with PrizePicks, and we've played it well all season long. We've got you covered with our PrizePicks 6 of the week that we reveal on Friday. It's daily fantasy made easy. It's easy to make your entries. You can do it in less than 60 seconds. So you just go to PrizePicks and look at the player projections there, and it's just getting more or less than those projections, and that's how you put it together. You pick 2 to 6 players, and they go score more or less than their price per projection. You can win up to 10 times on money on your entry. There's no competing against other people, just you versus projections available. PrizePicks offers projections on any sport that you watch. That's not just the NFL. You got NBA, NHL right now, college football, bowl season about to come. College basketball, they're in full swing. So a lot of good stuff there. Check it out at PrizePicks, different ways to play different sports. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. You can expect safe and fast withdrawals from PrizePicks. And PrizePicks is currently operational in more than 30 states and Canada. It is very easy to get on PrizePicks now. It's a great way to test out daily fantasy sports here down the stretch. If you're transitioning from seasonal or you're just in the playoffs and you want a little bit extra action, just download the PrizePicks app or go to PrizePicks.com to sign up to play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $200 with the promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. Don't forget to use the promo code Locked On and sign up for an instant deposit match worth up to $100. All right, it is time to close the show here in Locked On Fantasy Football. We'll go through the running backs real quick. Unfortunately, that Patriots backfield is a mess. We'll see if Damien Harris can return from his thigh injury. It is the Raiders matchup. Maybe a little Damien Harris, Josh Jacobs, Alabama kind of rivalry competition happening there. But you also have Kevin Harris and Pierre Strong Jr. They added 2 more backs to this mix. I say Harris might be more like the Damien Harris. So that makes a little bit of sense. Pierre Strong was the one who caught passes there. He might be more the poor man's James White in the Rondre Stevenson role. So Stevenson, it's a bummer. We'll see what happens with him because, again, he was doing everything there. He was getting the majority of snaps, getting the early down, the closing work, the receiving work, all of it. So now it's piecemeal again, the old Patriots backfield, the conundrum. So we need to see how it plays out. Anything can happen. But if Damien Harris returns, I feel the best about him for sure. And we'll look at who else is out there, but I would say look at the Texans situation. I guess you default to Rex Burkhead here if you're going there. Dari Ogunbowale is also in the mix. I think it'll be split between those guys, but I think maybe the veteran Burkhead will be out there to help with pass protection there if you look at it a little bit more. Chuba Hubbard getting great run. They said it's going to be a hot hand. It's not going to be just all down to Foreman. Hubbard has looked really good the last 2 games here. Great matchup at home against the Steelers. So Hubbard and Foreman is probably going to be the bread and butter of how they attacking, and Raheem Blackshear got in the mix. Unfortunately, it's a good old touchdown there from Hubbard and Foreman. But yeah, Chuba Hubbard definitely should be rostered in leagues there. And has potential as a flex here, just like Foreman, because of the split of backfield. Now, Travis Homer is the healthiest Seahawks running back. It can change a little bit. You had some limited practice here this week from the other ones. DJ Dallas, definitely not going to play here, that ankle injury. But you look at the opportunity for Kenneth Walker, he could definitely return this week. But again, Travis Homer almost played every snap against the Panthers for what it's worth. It's a tough matchup, however, this week against the 49ers. Speaking of the 49ers, the Seahawks are just getting destroyed on the ground, and they're not going to just run Christian McCaffrey into the ground. I mean, keep in mind, you got a lot of touches. It's a short week. They're trying to rest players. Jordan Mason could get a lot more run this week without Elijah Mitchell available for the 49ers. So Jordan Mason, great matchup this week. The 49ers should run all over the Seahawks. Mason, the trickle down should happen here out of McCaffrey. You have Tyler Algier. If he's been out of sight, out of mind, he should get a chance. It's all about the rookies now. So Algier, Drake London, and Desmond Ridder. The Falcons are in evaluation mode here. Joshua Kelly looked like the best runner behind Austin Eckler. We've seen different guys in that role, but Kelly is running hard, looking good, and really has shown that he's a good all-around back here. So Kelly would be your preferred handcuff should something happen to Eckler. You're not going to get the same receiving prowess, but at least you'll get the touchdown potential and the rushing there. Zamir White, last call, possibly to protect Josh Jacobs here. And the calf, he's been questionable a few weeks. He's played through it, but you want to make sure that you have access to that backfield. And Zamir White would be the guy. Same thing, James Conner's injury, it was a reminder there. Get Keontae Ingram. He's the clear backup here. You have Deion Jackson. So there's so many backs here that you have Jackson being behind Jonathan Taylor, the Alexander Madisons of the world, Jordan Mason we mentioned. Make sure you're protecting your lead backs as much as possible because you don't want to get stuck. You've got a stud, you're rolling, and you lose that player. And even like Miles Sanders there with Kenneth Gainwell, just make sure you got all your bases covered with your backup running backs here. That's my biggest advice here for that because that's where you have the most attrition. That's also where you find the most natural plug and play here for the playoffs. As again, the Boston Scott postulate of 2021 applying to 2022. Our defense, special teams, Broncos back in our good graces, had a pretty good game against the Chiefs, even though they gave up points. They get the Colt McCoy led Cardinals this week at home. The Panthers looked really good last week in Seattle, wreaking havoc on Geno Smith, getting a couple turnovers. They get Mitchell Trubisky at home this week, so take advantage of that. The Saints getting Desmond Ridder. Ridder could make some mistakes. We said he has some upside, but the Saints playing a rookie quarterback making his first start. The Commanders, Daniel Jones and the Giants struggling a little bit. Those turnovers are back in play. Yeah, the Cardinals also play against possibly Brett Rippon with Russell Wilson concussed there in that matchup for Denver. So give me Brett Rippon versus Colt McCoy. Enjoy the defenses in that one, folks. The Jets, Jared Goff not very good on the road here, so maybe some turnovers there for that Jets defense. People might be pivoting because the Lions offense is hot, but you can go in a different direction there with the Jets and take advantage of that. The Vikings step in. Matt Ryan can still make mistakes. It could be a negative game script, but that's a catch-22, right? You want that team to have some passing volume there, but that also is going to set up sacks and takeaways for the other team. And that's what we see with the Minnesota Vikings as a recommendation this week. So there you have it. There's a look at your waiver wire, trying to cover all our bases here. And again, good luck there in the fantasy football playoffs. Make sure you're reinforcing things, tighten things up on your bench. If you've got a bye week, look ahead to week number 16, make sure all the things are lined up there. You don't have any injury issues. If you have a bad matchup in a particular position where you got options, think about fortifying all that. So look ahead, always be looking a little bit ahead, and that's going to help you always on the waiver wire here. And we highly recommend that. All right. Thanks again for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today on Pickup Tuesday. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Go check it out here. It is a Locked On Sports Today. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. For this podcast, Locked On Fantasy Football, this is Vinnie Iyer. Good luck on all your fantasy football waiver claims, and we'll come back to the matchup Wednesday tomorrow, breaking down the quarterbacks and running backs, start, sit advice, and recommendations and rankings of the week.